Well, of course, I should say Três, Dois, Un. This is Carl Munson with the Good Morning Portugal show from expatsportugal.com. Good morning to you. How are you this morning? Do let us know who you are, where you are, and how you are today. We have a great guest for you this morning. Let's bring you onto the screen. Andy, the Doc Thompson is here. Hello, Andy.
Hello, bom dia, Carl.
Bon dia to you as well, my friend. Here to talk about your epic adventure. I think, probably, is it about a month ago now?
There you go, put me on the spot. Yes, it must have been about a month ago that I left, and I got back last week.
Amazing. And this is a journey from Portugal back to the UK and then back again from the UK to Portugal. I would say you chose a fairly good window, all for legitimate business. We should hastily add. The really interesting thing to me is how you, this sort of strikes terror into my heart, is being stopped by Portuguese police. Not that I've got anything to hide, but because of the difficulties of the language and the culture and that sort of thing, and explaining yourself as to why you're trying to cross the border. Then the same thing may be happening in Spain, and on it goes. So you'll tell us about your journey. I don't know whether you went from Spain or France or what it was you did, but you're going to tell us all about it now. We do welcome questions because we know at the best of times, of course, driving from Portugal back to the UK is an interesting journey for people, and one that some will have to make from our community. But we are talking also, of course, of the added dimension of all the pandemic lockdown restrictions and so on that you had to encounter. So take us away on this journey, Andy.
Sure. Well, when we came over in August, I'd been in Portugal before, but when myself and Leonie came over in August, we went through Santander because it's less drive. You get a nice break in the middle. But when I was planning to go back, and just so that people know, I was going back to return my Motability car, which had been over here nearly 6 months, so the insurance would have stopped. So I went back over. But when we came over, we went to Santander. When I was planning the trip back, it was clearly that Spain were going to lock all their borders except their land borders fairly tight. And I was worried about not being able to get back through Santander. And in fact, that would have proven to be the case. So the other thing was getting a test that would have been in time. So part of my research, clearly I could have had a test here, but I wasn't sure how long it was going to take. Spain, it was difficult to work out how you get a test. And in France, they were doing tests free. So anyone who had an EHIC could get a test almost just by walking into a health centre. So I decided that was the best way to go. So I had in the past driven down on that route and back, but that was when there were 3 drivers and it was a long time ago. I wasn't too phased anyway. So I left. I'll bring my map up. So I think I'll bring my map up.
There it is. Yep, I got it for you.
Perfect. So that was the beginning of my route up to Valladolid, but I didn't stop in Valladolid. So that was my first day's journey, all the way up from Leiria through Valladolid, Burgos, and up into the south of France. And as I got into...
Andy, how many miles is that, or kilometres?
Well, that on its own was 500 miles in a day.
Right, well done.
And it was interesting weather because Portugal was reasonably warm when I left. That's in Burgos, I think. But then, as you can see, coming through Spain, it was very cloudy. There was snow on the ground. Thankfully not on the roads, bit of snow on the top of the hills there. But I got to, I think it was on a Sunday, so I got to the south of France on a Sunday down here and phoned up to get an appointment for a test. I got an appointment the next morning. I went into this health centre here at 22 Avenue Foch, and I'm trying to remember the name of the town, but it's south of Bordeaux, as you can see.
Yeah, language. Mind your language.
Yeah. Anyway, so I got that, and then carried on up to La Rochelle. And as I got into La Rochelle, I got the result. So I had the result same day. Then I went from the other interesting thing was that I was towing an empty trailer, and yeah, because I wanted to come back with a fair amount of the items that we hadn't been able to bring the first time.
Yeah.
So the trailer started to misbehave because on the motorway up through Bordeaux, the jockey wheel had come loose, had basically been destroyed by me travelling at probably more than 50 miles an hour, which I shouldn't have done, but I was doing with an empty trailer. I wasn't too worried. But I destroyed the jockey wheel, and the electrical connection had come loose, and that plug had been destroyed as well. So, although I was happy that I had a negative result as I got into La Rochelle, I was looking for a Norauto, which is sort of the French equivalent of Quick Fit, I suppose.
Yes.
Or Halford, more likely. And they fixed it. I drove in, they fixed the jockey wheel, they fixed the electrics. And so I went up from La Rochelle up to Le Mans, spent a night at Le Mans, and then got the ferry from Caen up to Portsmouth. And getting in to the UK was easy enough. I had my test results, and I had my passenger tracking form, and I had to show that in order to get onto the ferry.
Yeah.
The first time I've been checked on the journey back. So that was all well and good, and I spent my 10 days in isolation in Birmingham, having spent a night at friends in Winchester. And then after we did after I'd done the 10 days isolation, I had 5 days to get everything together before I came back. So I had a friend helping me pack the trailer. I came back with a full trailer, a full roof box, a new car, a left-hand drive, not new, but a new second-hand car, left-hand drive BMW 520 Estate. That was totally packed.
To the good.
And the roof box was packed. The trailer was packed, and so on the way back, I was definitely limited to 50 miles an hour, and so I came. Got up at 6 o'clock, spent the night in Winchester again, got up at 6 o'clock, got down to Portsmouth for 6:30, had a 8 o'clock sailing back to Caen, and then I stayed in I stayed in Rennes in Brittany for the first night. Coming into Caen, it was interesting. I nearly didn't get into France because I had various papers. I had my self-declaration of a derogation from the curfew, because being disabled, the curfew in France didn't apply. I had a form which I ticked and signed to say, yes, I'm resident in Portugal, therefore I'm allowed back in according to the French rules. And I had my negative test that I obtained in the UK. But the French border guards at Caen were very insistent that I prove that I'd been resident before December the 31st. They wanted to see my inbound ticket to whichever you want to call it, but the ticket I had from Caen to Portsmouth, which I hadn't kept. And I said, look, my residence document is actually dated November, and my previous residence document is dated 2 years ago. So I've been resident all that time. Anyway, eventually, it was clear I wasn't budging, and they decided they'd better, so that was okay.
Very good, very good. Well, so they thought you might be a kind of some sort of post-Brexit chancer then?
I think so. Yeah, that was the idea.
Okay.
But then I had a flat tire on the trailer. So this was very interesting because I suddenly heard this sort of knocking noise and pulled over to the side of the road just outside, actually, Wheatstone, which is the port. and it started to snow as I got out to have a look what was happening. The wheel was buckled. The tyre was totally flat. I had a spare, but having had a stroke and only being able to use one hand, I couldn't replace it myself. So I sat in the car, phoned the Automobile Club of Portugal, who had said I had cover abroad, and they started telling me that I had no cover.
No.
Yes. So as they told me that, a minibus full of French gendarmes, or should I say, I don't know what the feminine is for gendarmes, but anyway, they were all female police officers, stopped and started talking to me in French while I was on the phone to the ACP. So I told them, look, I put the phone down on ACP. And the French police called their recovery people, and so for the cost of €230, I got my wheel changed.
So hold on a minute, because this is this is turning into some sort of 70s Carry On movie when a minibus full of French policewomen turns up. Or a less reputable movie, I might add. But they weren't stopping out of concern for you. They were stopping out of concern for the highway and keeping things moving. Is that right?
I think so. I think so, because the initial, what they were saying initially, from what I could gather with my schoolboy French, which I hadn't practiced for about 20 years.
I'm sure they found that charming. I'm sure they loved it.
But they were very nice, and although they were fairly firm, they were very, very polite. But they wanted you to move from the road, which is a single track road. Anyway, they ended up standing in the snow, directing the traffic, waiting for the recovery guy to come. And eventually, I was on my way.
So, back to the map.
The next day, I did a very long. This was another long trip. This was about 350 miles, and I'd chosen a place to stay on the way back in the south of France, in the Vendée, which I'd never been to before, but it was way off the beaten track. What I ought to say is, coming into Rennes, so I now had a 10-year-old BMW with a 10-year-old sat-nav. So apart from the fact that there'd been numerous changes to the road since that sat-nav was done, Rennes were taking advantage of the lockdown to tear up their city centre streets. So I ended up going the wrong way down a one-way road in order to get to the hotel, having been round and round 3 times in the dark. So that was fun. I had a similar experience in this little village on the Vendée, where the Airbnb was down a cul-de-sac, and trying to find that was fun. But I found that again at the end of the day. Airbnb and Booking.com were my saviours in terms of finding places to stay. And at the moment, very cheap. €40 a night was the cheapest. I think the maximum I paid was 55. And what I would say is the breakfast got worse as you got north. So I had 3 breakfasts in France going north. The first one was just around Bayonne. Was you go into the self-serve cafe one at a time. Someone carried my tray for me, which was very kind. The next one I went to was a bag of various pieces of bread, and the third one up in Le Mans was the same but worse.
It sounds like Dickensian continental breakfast. I mean, continental breakfasts are a bit of an excuse, aren't they, for all sorts of sins normally? But the pandemic effect on the continental breakfast is clearly not favourable.
No. But Spain was fantastic. So when I got back into Spain, sorry.
Ooh, party time.
No, I'm not.
I reckon. Is it those French? It's those French policewomen trying to make sure you're all right.
Well, it's my Portuguese phone with an English number, so goodness knows what that is. Anyway, so coming into Spain. Oh, the other thing was coming into Spain. My windscreen wipers decided they were going to stop working, which was interesting.
Yeah.
And so, really sorry. I'll put my
Don't
other
worry,
phone on.
it's fine. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of variables here. Absolutely, you can take it as well if you want. If you want to.
No. Anyway, the windscreen wipers stopped working coming into Spain, and it was thankfully there were only a few showers, but I found that the dash cam function on my mobile phone, which is attached to the windscreen, actually had an image enhancement function, so I could see better where I was going by looking at the camera, by looking at the phone, than by looking through the windscreen myself.
Unbelievable! You're like a fighter pilot then, looking at the heads-up display.
Heads-up display.
Wow.
Anyway, that was short-lived because there wasn't much rain, and got to a very good place south of Valladolid, the Hotel El Jardin de la Abadia, and I would recommend it to anyone who's stopping around there because, okay, Joel, it would be easy to just buy a car here, but it wouldn't because honestly, because I need to have my car modified for left foot accelerator.
Yeah.
And I also needed to change my cars. So I had to take the trailer back, so it wouldn't have been easier at all.
No, we know Joel. We know Joel. That's a very Joel sort of. It's almost Vulcan logic, isn't it? And we totally get that. But you casually threw into the conversation there, Andy, that you're disabled. You're a wheelchair user, and you've only got use of one good arm.
Yeah, and one foot as well.
And you've got all of this going on that you casually mention as part of the of the many dynamics at work here. So, I mean, it's just incredible.
Well, it was I've travelled around the world on my own since my stroke, and I've driven a lot. I've driven to Germany and stuff. So I'm not been. It's never been an issue. It's just something else to get over. But this hotel in Valladolid, I must mention it because I got there. The parking I knew was going to be an issue with the trailer on the back. And what they did, there was an alleyway beside the hotel, which very clearly said no vehicles. But what they did, they blocked the entrance to it. When I arrived, they unblocked the entrance to it, said, come down here. So I parked down there. They said, as long as you leave by 9 o'clock in the morning, you'll be okay. Otherwise, the police will tow your vehicle. But I was wondering how they were going to tow the vehicle when I'd gone nose in with a trailer on the back. I'd have loved to see them try, but I planned on leaving before 9 anyway. But they were brilliant, and they had a restaurant that was open, socially distanced, both for supper and breakfast, and that was the best breakfast I'd had, and they were very good. And I think that cost me, for the room alone, was €55, but it was a big double ensuite room. But very good. Eventually, and this is the fun bit, got back through, coming through the border point just east of Garda. The SEF police decided that they were stopping everyone, and they said, where are your papers? So I gave them my certificate of residence of a European citizen. I haven't been here 5 years yet. Gave them my Freguesa declaration, and they said, "Oh, your papers are out of date." I said, "No, this is all I've got. I have applied for my identity card that you're going to issue, but I haven't had an appointment yet. But your papers are out of date. But I've applied, and it's your department that hasn't given me an appointment yet."
Yes.
But my papers are out of date. Round and round and round. Eventually, again, like Kang, they realised I wasn't going to stop. So I said, or they let me through. And I came back down, and it was fantastic coming back, seeing the snow on the mountains above Castelbranco, and coming down through Coimbra, where the river was had burst its banks, but thankfully was still within the flood defences. As I got back into Leiria, it started raining again, so I had the camera trick going on, and arrived in time for an early supper. So there we are. That was it. I have now fixed the the windscreen wipers. So that's good. But yeah, great journey. And
And
welcoming.
so much for German engineering.
You are, yeah. Well, it's 10 years old, so it's great fun.
They don't make them like they used to, but it sounds like a lovely vehicle, made for that sort of journey, right? A tourer. Yeah. Countryman. Amazing. Let's say hello to a few of our friends and who've come to hear this fascinating journey this morning. Thank you for that, Andy. Quite incredible. There's a book in that, isn't there? And there's a film. There's all sorts of merchandise as well. The action figure. Because I'm thinking at any moment it could have turned into like a Bruce Willis style movie where you're stripped down to a dirty vest, trying to make your way through a tunnel or something like that. It's really, this is modern day Phileas Fogg, great adventure stuff that you've done, taking on the whole aspect of the restrictions, and just a journey of that kind in the best of times is no light undertaking. So congratulations, well done. It's great to have you back.
Thank you. It's good to be back. Honestly.
Nick in London, bon dia alegria. So actually, with the doc here, it's bon dia alegria in Leiria, isn't it?
Indeed, it is.
Full thing. Elsa Raiola, bon dia from a sunny and dry so far North Wales. She always has to put caveats in about the North Wales weather there, understandably. Lee McGrady, he has got a good result, so he can get back out to work after climbing up the walls for 10 days, I think. So congratulations to you, Lee. Bon dia from Povo de Vagim, from Mark up there in the north of Portugal. Lisa Simpson's here, everybody. Bon dia. Anna Forsberg, good morning. We are finally in our new property in Panolas Orik. Oh, excellent. Got access 6 days ago. Congratulations to you, Anna. That sounds great. David Bantok's here. Bon dia, alegria, all Doros. And bon dia, de Miranda de Corvo from our wonderful Filomena. From Moscow, bon dia, hi Andy, to you. Lisa's saying, I'm rattling through this because there's lots of lovely comments this morning. I'm due to travel in a commercial Arctic lorry at the end of March. That should also be interesting, but you don't have to get out of those, do you? You can stay in those for weeks on end, I think, with a refrigerator and a jacuzzi and all that sort of stuff in a modern Arctic.
The interesting thing about travelling commercially, you're probably not going to have to pay £1,800 to stay 10 days or is it £80? I can't remember. Anyway, too much to stay in a hotel for 10 days when you get back to the UK because you're a commercial traveller.
I suspect then that suddenly there are lots of people who are Arctic lorry co-pilots all of a sudden. Isn't that human ingenuity is incredible, isn't it? And of course, you missed that opportunity, didn't you, to stay in a budget hotel for £1,800? It was good timing on your part. I can't imagine what that's going to be like. Talk about a bad breakfast. They've got you as a captive audience, haven't they, in that travel lodge or whatever you end up in for 10 days at your own massive expense. I'm sure we'll be hearing horror stories in the Daily Mail soon about that. Bon dia from Joel, who's already given us a bit of input. Hello, Sunny, listening on the way to work over there in the UK. Fantastic. David, Philomena, people talking to each other. That's fantastic. Bon dia to David from Philomena there. Peter, thanks so much for sharing your experience, Andy. Really useful for us planning the same journey in a few weeks. It's absolutely priceless information, and your courage with this as well, Andy, I think is a lesson to people as well. Come back to that in a bit, because I love the way you've dealt with the borders, actually. Any speeding tickets, Doc? It looks like Nick got caught around Salamanca, or you don't know as yet.
Well, I set my I love my word finding problems. Set my cruise control at 80 kilometers an hour, so I don't think it's likely.
Right. Okay. Very good. Modern technology coming to the aid to combat other modern technology there. Bon dia, alegria from Rizal, Furtado. Our guest yesterday, Ernest from Rizal. Great to talk to you yesterday, you guys. Bellissimo dia a todos from Marcos. Good morning, Marcos, from the south of Portugal this morning. Bon dia, alegria. We're really getting into this. Thank you, Filomena, for suggesting this. Our own special greeting, I'd like to think. We had a stunning sunrise here this morning. It'll be 20 degrees later today. It's not the perfect Camanas de Tavira, though, as the people are missing. Of course, that's the missing thing at the moment, isn't it? And hopefully we'll have that behind us soon. Bon dia, everyone, from a bright Torres Vedras, from Susan. Good morning to you. Pete, Same here, says a solo 50 plus expats Portugal. That's Louise to us. You took the words right out of my mouth. I feel a song coming on. Bon dia from Carla Reis this morning. Ginny Austin's here as well. Good morning, bon dia, listening while working. This is a great habit. Thank you for everybody who listens whilst working. Or I love the idea of people pretending to work with a spreadsheet in the office that they've got on the front of the screen whilst they're tuned into the Good Morning Portugal show, working on their fantasy to be out of wherever they are and in Portugal sometime soon. Oh, ferry in winter. OMG, Andy, too many rivers of puke. I hope you've had your breakfast, taking kids on school trips for that tunnel. Oh, yeah, teacher speaking there. I mean, any teacher that takes a group of kids on a French trip from the UK deserves a medal, right? And so he's not keen on the ferry in winter. Are you okay with that sort of thing?
I come from a nautical family. I used to sail. I would if I could, and I've never had a problem. I remember coming back on a family holiday in the early 80s when I was about 17. I was the only one in the restaurant eating a second breakfast as we came up the Southampton water. Everyone else was still trying to clean up the results of a very rough channel crossing in the cabin.
We know your sort. We know your sort. Out on deck as well.
Yeah.
Shouting at the storm.
Absolutely. Do your worst.
Bon dia, Alegria, from Mark over there in Australia this morning. I'm doing it the opposite way. UK to Portugal, going from Dieppe, says Louise. So this has been absolutely brilliant for her. Peter Bleach, I had a nightmare trip from Southampton to Jersey. I can identify with that. It was gruesome. I think people are really feeling the pain of this. And all those little plot twists you weren't expecting, that you've dealt with so well. It's amazing, Andy. This is so useful. Print outbound ticket is now on my to-do list. I mean, you've got to have a hell of a checklist, haven't you? Also had to list call ACP to confirm breakdown cover. We are associates of ACP. You can join the ACP through expatsportugal.com. So look for that in the perks and benefits on our website. Anna had to go, but thanks for tuning in when you did. See you another day, Anna. Okay, love the tunnel, says Peter. So much better than that horrid crossing, saying to Louise, always best to have double protection, especially given this is the only trip we're doing for ages. Yep. So lots of planning going into this for people and some great help and intel from you, Andy. It's great. Morning from Castanera de Pera from Peter, our resident videographer and exec producer, cleaning up all the feathers and sequins after yesterday's carnival party. We'll have to re-wax the floors after all that samba. Yeah, it's a condition he often finds himself in. And then he woke up. Because imagine this year, unless he did that on his own yesterday or the household, maybe they did. They do that sort of thing in Castanera de Pera. He probably did get dressed up and danced around and not cut up a rug, but just tore up the parquet flooring yesterday. So I hope you had a good carnival day. Everybody, as best as you were able. Sorry, late to the show. Needed to finish some painting, which I started at 5:30 this morning. This is really good to know, Doc, isn't it? That we are actually more interesting than watching paint dry. Literally, we are getting this feedback. So he stopped watching paint dry to watch us. That's great, Gary. Thank you. Sounds like carry on driving, but I expect it didn't feel like that at the time. I mean, did you feel like Sid James at any moment when the bus full of French policewomen turned up?
That was probably the highlight of the trip. I've never really been phased. I just carry on, you know.
Yeah,
but I am.
Well, yes, I want to ask you about that because the border thing. It's a bit like how some people, just get really nervous if a police officer is in their view. They get really nervous. They haven't done anything. They're just sort of conditioned to get nervous. And I think people have the same sort of thing in immigration and border controls. And you spoke of two instances there where you just stood your ground or sat in the car anyway, and and said, look, it's not my fault. This is how it is. And you were in a standoff essentially, and you'd recommend that. Okay, you're on the right side of the law, the legislation. Here are the papers, and you make it their problem rather than yours. You don't slink away.
Absolutely. So the one, I mean, keeping the outbound ticket was just bonkers, and the French were totally out of their, or ultra vires is the term used. They couldn't have, they didn't have the right to ask me to do that. However, when I came back into Portugal, as Peter explained, I think the first show I was back tuned back into last week when I came back, there is a barcode that you get sent in the email that acknowledges your application for the ID card. I haven't clocked that, but I should have had that. So make sure if you're going out of Portugal and come back in while the border controls are in place, that you've got that barcode. Either print it out or make sure you've got it saved on your phone.
Very good.
Louise and Paul Blackman asked if I have any issues at the Spanish border. So I had no issues going out of Portugal because they hadn't locked it down. It was a couple of days beforehand. There were absolutely no controls at the French-Spanish border. The Santander, the Spanish, are only allowing Spanish residents through the ports and airports, I understand, which is one of the reasons why I went the French route, apart from getting the test easier.
Yeah.
And obviously coming back in was the Portuguese controls. There's a story this morning on one of the Portuguese websites that there was an Audi that effectively crashed through the controls going from Portugal to Spain and back through again at speed a few hours later. Apparently a Portuguese Garda registered Audi A5, so I think they're probably searching for them now.
And that makes it worse for everybody, doesn't it? When somebody does something like that, it kind of, it raises the game, unfortunately. That's a sad thing about what's going on at the moment. Good to have you back home, Andy, says Gary. Pete saying, breakfast got worse as you went north. Garvo isn't going to be happy. So the worst was Birmingham. Are you prepared to go on the record to say that? Are you talking about continental Europe? Or are you including Britain in that?
There was nowhere open in Britain to buy breakfast, so breakfast was prepared by me. Unfortunately, Wetherspoons are included in the general lockdown, so you can go and get a cheap Wetherspoons breakfast anywhere. Actually, a Wetherspoons breakfast would have been preferable to any that I had on the way north.
That is saying something. That is saying something. And I imagine Tim Martin has managed to buy the little pings that go on the sat nav to tell you you're in within a few minutes of a Wetherspoon somewhere, and there's a little token that you can share maybe, so that you're. This is for anyone who doesn't know, who might be listening in another part of the world. I think in a Wetherspoons breakfast, you get a full English and a pint of Guinness for about £1.50, right?
Yeah, something like that. And actually, when it was help out to eat out, it was 50% off that. You know?
Yeah, you can treat the missus on those occasions. Fantastic. So we've dealt with this show. It would have been easier to buy a car here. This is an interesting point, Andy, because adaptations for cars for disabled car drivers. There may be a more general point because other people will be in that situation coming into Portugal. Is that a very costly thing to do here in Portugal to make the sort of Motability style adaptations?
So I did a bit of research when we were looking at finally coming out here last year. I wasn't seriously looking because I knew that I was going to be driving out. I'd therefore have to take a car back. I therefore want to buy a car in the UK. But I had looked at adaptations and hadn't found it as easy. I'm sure the companies exist. Yeah. And I know that because I've got 83% disability in Portugal. So Social Security would pay for it. However, finding it is difficult, obviously, with the language and all the rest of it. It wasn't cheap in the UK because the BMW isn't a Motability car. I had to pay for the left foot accelerator myself. That was 750 quid. So these things aren't cheap.
Well, so disability premiums everywhere. It's not right, is it? But there you go. And you've obviously looked into this, and I'm sure you wouldn't mind helping others in need of that sort of information if necessary.
Not at all. Wouldn't mind at all.
Okay, so that's fantastic, Andy. Bon dia alegria sounds like an epic journey. Carry on, Doc. We've got the name of the movie, I think. This is when we. I don't know. We do need to ring Pinewood up and get in touch with the old Carry On movie makers to see if we, because we've got a few characters in this community. I'd love to be in it. Okay.
Yes.
This is so useful. Coffee or a beer on me. Look, this is for you oldies who are not used to this sort of technology. This is a thing called Super Chat, where you can gift a donation, and so moved by this information this morning. And I feel a bit of a fraud here because Andy's giving all the information, but it's me it's Expats Portugal that gets the £5. I tell you what, Andy, we'll split this. We'll go and we'll have 5 meals at Weatherspoons for this.
Yes.
All right. Okay, thank you, Louise. Really appreciate that. There are Portuguese companies that do modifications. I know at least one company. So there you go. Joel can help us out with that. That's fantastic. When Terence last went to the UK Customs in Britain, they decided they wanted to take his van apart looking for who knows what. Often it's because they can, right? I mean, that's the thing people worry about, isn't it? Whether they've reason to or not. You don't want that little, go over there in the covered thing and then have your vehicle taken to pieces like a jigsaw.
I was so. Let me think. Someone looked at our trailer. Was it one? Yeah. The French. So I've forgotten about that. So when I was going back into the UK before I got onto the boat, the French looked in my trailer. They said, "Oh, they want something in the trailer." I said, "Here are the keys. Fill your boots. I'm disabled. I'm not getting out of the car." And if anyone wanted to take apart the trailer or the roof box, I said, "Look, I'm disabled. I can't fit it. I help to fit it. Do what you like. Put it all back together." Yeah. I suspect they wouldn't have bothered.
Yeah. It's all about approach and attitude, as we've discovered from Andy this morning, I think. Paul Richards, good morning, Paul. Morning from Harrogate. Drove from Santander to Faro. Took my time 3 days. Stayed at Salamanca. Superb. So there's another note for people. Salamanca, good place to stop on that drive. Jerry, it's an appeal that's coming slightly sort of different to the conversation we're having, but this is very important. We have a member who needs urgent surgery to remove a bladder and prostate, looking to contact someone with similar experience in Portugal who is willing to share about their experiences here. That's what we're all about at expatsportugal.com, the community helping each other. So do email Jerry at expatsportugal.com if you do have some experience or pointers there for that member in need of urgent help by the sound of it. Thanks, Jerry, for that this morning. Anna is here as well. Bon dia, Hank Stalica. Hola, bon dia. And hola, Comrade Andy from... You only have to say Comrade Andy and up it comes. Standing joke between you two, I think. Great adventure, Andy, says Anna. You are really brave, Andy. Thanks so much for sharing. Yeah, not only doing the journey, but coming on here and sharing all the info with us. It's really great. Hi, Doc and Carl. Lovely to put a face to the name. Update. Oh, baby Zake is now home and doing great because this is the baby who was in your town, right? Doc has done a fantastic job there. Yeah, because he was very premature and home now, which is wonderful. So properly united and bonding with mum and family there. That's great news about Zake. Thanks, Fiona, for that. A late good morning to everyone from Perky Perkins there in the Alentejo. Good morning to you, Neil. Looking good, sir, when you got the barbecue out. We saw the pictures of that photo. I couldn't see anything on the barbecue. Were you just poking your coals, so to speak, at that stage? I was hoping to see a juicy sausage in your photograph, or did I really? Driving from Jersey to Portugal, says Lisa. Carry on barbecue. Great to hear this, Andy. Brilliant to listen to. That's Ronnie over there in Devon in the UK. Good morning, Cole. Good morning to you, Ronnie. Lots of love to the family there. Pete Wilton Davis. I had a great travel experience near Rennes many years ago after a year in a camper van surfing Europe and Morocco. Wow, this sounds like another great one. We've got a book here, haven't we? These are various chapters of this wonderful book of travels. Our van broke down on the way to the ferry back to Jersey. We limped into this town and stopped at the first bar, walked in and asked where we could find a mechanic. 2 Jersey surfers go into a bar. It's the beginning of a joke, isn't it? A whole bar of about 30 men started laughing, and we found out that it was the annual meeting of local mechanics. You can't write it. Needless to say, they got us on our way, and at no cost. Amazing day. I guess you what you don't want to happen is for 30 mechanics to be arguing about the diagnosis and actually so it can get done there. You know what fellas are like? We now have our S1 documentation, says Susan. Do we need to go to Centro de Saúde and replace our documento de identificación de utente with the S1 documents? Doc says no.
So the documento de identificación de utente you need to keep, but you get an EHIC with the S1, don't you? A Portuguese EHIC, is that right?
I think you do. I think you do. Yes. Yeah.
But you have to go to Social Security to get that, the local Social Security office. So, I've got a Portuguese Social Security number on the basis of going to go and get my EHIC. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I think you need to go to your local Centro de Saúde to get the latest version of whatever you need. And I think they will understand if you show up with your residencia documents there, Susan. Another good question for the forum, actually, to see what experience others have had there. expatsportugal.com/community. Some new faces here. Louise and Paul Blackman, good morning to you. Bon dia, alegria. First time on the chat. We're hopefully returning in a month's time. Did Andy have any issues at the Spanish border? You spoke of your experience at the Spanish border. Anything else to add?
No. There's a really good website called Reopen EU, and they have very up-to-date information on all the countries' restrictions. They take a day or two to update, but check on there first, and also check the UK.gov travel information. But no, I had no issues at the Spanish border. It was only the Portuguese SCF. I had no problems getting into Spain either through France or through Portugal. But there is this question about the ports as to whether or not you'd be allowed through without being a Spanish resident.
Okay, there you go, Louise and Paul. What was that website address again?
If you Google, and I can't remember the actual address, but if you just Google Reopen EU.
Okay, I'll just put something along those lines. So Reopen EU is going to be helpful by the sound of it.
Yeah, it might be even reopen.eu.
Okay. All right. I think that's a good start, though, for Googling that. Thanks, Andy, on that. I actually love the whole trip from here in the Algarve back to Southampton via Santander, even when it's a forced night. Another one. So both of you standing up there on the deck.
Yeah.
Brothers in sou'westers there, or probably stripped to the chest, actually, to be fair. Bon dia, of course, from rainy Nottingham, from Michelle. Magine, morning. I finally received a reminder and link to your program. It worked. Thank you. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. We do have, there are so many variables with this, Facebook and YouTube. Sometimes people do get lost in some sort of techno loop, but glad to hear that's sorted out for you. I think the most reliable way is to subscribe to YouTube and ask for a reminder, and that should work out. Did you manage to get the details of any single gendarmeries for Joel? I think he likes the uniform. Sadly not, but I think he's probably might have their number or something like that, or a photo of the minibus. Jesus, my better half is so much better than me. Already had the outbound and barcode printed prior to this. I would be lost without her. I feel another song coming on there. It's good to know that, Pete, that you've got some good backup there. While you're watching us, someone is actually taking care of things behind the scenes. Worst run-in with the authorities was when on our honeymoon in the Seychelles, we took a wrong turn and ended up at the governor's residence where we had a 50 cal machine gun trained on us. We turned around quickly. I can imagine Linda might have thought this was a surprise hotel you were taking her to. This looks nice. And suddenly out comes the big machine gun. Live to tell the tale, obviously. Is it bad I raised my fist when Andy did? Even though he can't see me. What's wrong with me? He's got through to you. David Abitbol is here. Hello, David. You joined us a little bit late yesterday, so that's why your comments weren't being answered. We but when the show's finished, we don't have anyone hanging around yet to respond to those sort of comments. But great to see you here live on the show. Jerry is diagnosed to Hank already. Sounds like you're suffering from Zoomitis, which I'm sure is a recognised condition now across the world. And Hank sympathising with the situation there. So, anyone who doesn't have any experience in Portugal, surgery, bladder, prostate removal and subsequent care, please let us know. News coming in from David that he has got his second Moderna vaccine dose today. Now can I fly to Europe from the USA? No. I don't think so yet, David. So keep doing the necessary, and hopefully all these. I was actually going to ask Andy about that before we go, about what his guess is about this situation as a doctor, former doctor in practice back in the UK. And good luck to Lisa Ryan Simpson, who is driving down here from Jersey. Did the same 11 years ago and never regretted it. Bem-vindo a ela. So yes, good journey to her. Thank you, Pete, for that. Fellow Jerseyans, I forget what the collective noun is for Jersey people. Reopen EU. That's the. Have you got a collective noun for Jersey people? You were laughing there, Andy. I noticed.
Well, I figured it's probably a chest of jerseys.
A chest of jerseys, very good. I thought you were going to make a potato reference there, but the Jersey Royals. Does Andy or anybody know, are items in the pharmacy cheaper if you have a prescription from the doctor rather than just turning up and purchasing? A doctorly inquiry, which I'm sure you can answer.
They're massively cheaper. I have a regular monthly prescription for something that cost me €26 without a prescription, and I think €4 with, or something ridiculous. So yes.
Yep. Okay, very good. That's a simply answered there, Neil. And no juicy sausage there, more of a porco preto. But I bet that's what you tell all the ladies. And lombino on the barbecue on Sunday. Hank saying congratulations to David. You made it. And they are, of course, Jersey beans, the collective now. Yeah, so Andy, thank you so much. Would you care to talk a little bit now about your view as a learned doctor on how these restrictions may or may not be lifted, the general approach? You might want to talk about UK, but I mean, here we are on Good Morning Portugal. How do you think it's going in Portugal?
Well, I think the lockdown, the recent lockdown, has clearly had a huge effect on cases. The spike was very tall but very narrow. If you look at the graph, so and people generally are much better behaved here than in the UK. In terms of the what's happening with the vaccinations, though, we're suffering from I think a 50% delivery of the vaccines that had been ordered, and I don't think the orders were big enough to start with. So, and we're struggling with medical staff. So, hence the teams coming in from elsewhere in Europe. But I do think that that we are starting to see a very clear effect of the vaccine in the UK in terms of a reduction in cases, and I expect to see that here. I would encourage anyone to get the vaccine as soon as they're invited to do so. And I would be surprised if we weren't approaching normality by late summer. I don't think it's going to be much before that, although I suspect schools will be back probably for the summer term.
Interesting. Okay, that's a very sort of a learned and interesting prediction about how it might turn out, evolve, I guess, and this is happening on a day-to-day basis, isn't it?
Yeah.
On the other side of things, I mean, how do you feel about? I mean, you must in your studies, in medicine, the history of. I mean, or is there a history of lockdown? I mean, or is this a sort of uncharted, unprecedented territory for us? Because it seems the appetite for restriction is causing increasing frustration. How has that been handled historically? What are your predictions there on how that can be managed?
I mean, in very ancient history, go back to Roman times. There were leper colonies that continued through the Middle Ages with the restrictions on lepers, plague victims, the identification of plague houses. Coming into more modern medical history, I don't think I'm not sure how they handled the Spanish flu, but of course, things are very different now. We're crowded, we're mobile. Back in the early part of the last century, people would have been mobile, but only within their very local community, and there wasn't the huge commuting and social travel that there is now, and there weren't the apart from some certain slum areas, but we have and Portugal isn't so bad, except maybe in Lisbon and Porto. But you look at the UK, One of the most populated areas in Europe, or probably the most populated country in Europe in terms of people per square mile. It's not surprising that this virus has spread like wildfire. So I don't think we've really had this situation to handle in recent history.
Mm. Yeah, and that's why the idea of leper colonies and plague houses just seems so bizarre and historical, doesn't it? It does it's chilling when you say that. It's absolutely chilling, and we are in this time of incredible the word of the times is unprecedented, isn't it? So we will see what happens. And when you said returning to normality, something that occurred to me in these last couple of days, and actually going out last night to get a takeaway, how do you return to normality after over a year of something? Because the sort of neuroscientists or psychologists will tell you, won't you, that any change after you've done a change of behavior for about a month or something, the human can adapt very easily to things, right? Or not easily, but incredibly. We have an incredible versatility, and of course, the Darwinian idea that those who do that best are the most successful. And we've been adapting for over a year now, haven't we, to something? So I was thinking, like yesterday when I went out to get a takeaway, it had been a while since I'd talked to anyone Portuguese, and I really enjoyed being out of my depth trying to order a meal, which was part of daily life before. And it was really exceptional, and I'd missed it. And I bought some bread from the bakery because I've been buying flipping part-baked Lidl stuff for weeks on end. And then I bought some proper Portuguese bread, and I thought, this is what I came here for. I forgot about this. And it's amazing how cultural things can go out of your mind after a month of being conditioned and trained to do something different. What will normality is going to be a bit of a shock for people, isn't it? If we ever get back to it.
I think so. I mean, it is going to take a while, and there will be things that are different. I mean, I suspect hugging is going to take a while. Hugging people who aren't close family is going to take a while to come back, or shaking hands. It's interesting to see on British television, the shows that are recorded since lockdown, how behaviours changed, and of course that then reinforces it in the general population. But in the way that we've changed to accommodate the pandemic, we will change back. We will readopt the good things that we've lost. I think I may be wrong, but I would be surprised if we don't readopt the good things that we're missing.
I hope so. And all the wonderful things we love about Portugal. It's up to the expats who are here to educate the new ones in what we used to do before the lockdown. Right? Back in the day, we used to go out for these little custard tarts and coffee. We'll have to sort of have what's it called when you start an induction? We'll have to sort of re-induct people into expat cultural life here in Portugal for those who might be new to it. I mean, it's incredible, and that's what shook me last night. Is you forget some of the things that you've now taken on as second nature and habits. Like bread from the local bakery, talking to Portuguese people, being out in my depth. I just thought, I haven't done this for weeks, possibly months. This isn't good, and I've forgotten how to do it. And I was just so exhilarated to be doing it again, if that makes any sense. Okay, they are Jersey beans. Lisa says, we're called beans because of the Jersey bean crock dish. Very good. Eric saying, "Body Andy, thanks for sharing. The available information is a vacuum. I'm planning on driving to Berlin, and we'll have to see what pops up during the drive and battle like you did." Yeah, fair play, Eric. And that's why that's why I asked Andy to come this morning, because I'm aware that people are quite anxious about what they might come up against, and it's been fantastic to have Andy share his experience and real experience from the front line, the borders. Jersey beans and Guernsey donkeys. I don't think Guernsey people are going to like that very much. And yes, they both actually exist, as well as our famous jumpers or jerseys. There you go. This is actually, I should have said, this is Ask Anything About Portugal Day on a Wednesday. We've dealt with Andy's epic journey, which has been, I'm sure, a lot of value to a lot of people, as we've seen in the comments there. But here's one from left field. What is your thoughts about software testing industry there? I'm assuming this is in Portugal. I can't answer that, Manoj. I don't really know, except to say that Portugal is doing its utmost best to attract entrepreneurs and startups in technology. Up near Joel, Matosinhos is an amazing tech startup area. So I'm guessing software testing is pretty admirable and in development here, and not Jersey, but Portugal will be gaining a good reputation, hopefully, in that area. I don't know about you, Doc. You're quite an IT literate person, aren't you?
Reasonably, I do a bit of programming, but all self-trained and amateur, and I don't have any contact with the industry. So yeah,
this is not a contract. It's not a contract you're willing to take on. Fair enough. Neil Peter, don't forget the original name in patois, the Jersey Crappos. That's it. That's one they probably don't want to use too often, to be fair. Do you know of anyone here in Portugal who has received at least the first shot? Which area of Portugal was that? I don't actually. Are you hearing any reports, Andy?
I'm supposed to be in the first wave. I've had no contact. I'm going to go to the health centre and just make sure they have got me down in the first wave. But
yeah. Okay. So yeah, Andy would be the first to know, but we don't at the moment. A big hello finally to Neil, another bean in Portugal. Although I'm not officially one, we could make a feijoada with us all here, I reckon. Yeah, the special Jersey feijoada would be amazing, wouldn't it? Lo and behold, says Penny, Endeavour mass testing is going to start in the UK with the lateral flow test. I don't really know what that is. Andy, well, the accurate test. The far more expensive PCR tests and inaccurate used up to now, despite knowing they were not designed for the purpose and gave far too many false positives, so the figures will come down nicely to suit the narrative, says Penny, somewhat cynically there. Maybe not cynically. You know, I don't mean to undermine anyone's views here, but that's certainly a view that I've heard as well, as we hear many in our world of instant and mass communication, which I'm sure is making it very difficult for those who are governing public health. Carl, I have noticed that LS sessions, what are they? Get very few. Live stream. Okay. I always do it and also comment on your videos because I know it helps the algorithm find you and builds your channel's exposure. Mark, thank you so much. Everybody, please please like the live streams and do what Mark says there, and boost our algorithm. Talking of information going around on social media, I'm pretty sure others here will do the same if they are aware. So yes, if you wouldn't mind doing that, do press the like button, make a comment, and that will be really helpful to us, I'm sure. I'm a newbie to this. I'm new as a YouTuber influencer, if I can dare call myself that. I say to my son, 9-year-old son, he watches these gaming influencers. I say, I've got over 3,000 subscribers now, Digby, and he says, Dan TDM has got 5 million. So there's a little bit of work to do there. It seems to me that people returned to normality after the Spanish flu, and that lasted 3 years. Oh my word! It seems to me we'll get back pretty quickly. Says Hank. Any thoughts on the great ivermectin and vitamin debate? So, yeah, Andy, if you don't mind me asking you about this, and I think Penny, is voicing. That's a voice coming from a community that is not. I mean, people are very able to express themselves in social media, their reservations, their opinions. But I think she's absolutely right that there is a kind of overwhelming narrative that tends to not just exclude those voices, but ridicule them, and that would include, I think, things about helpful nutrition and this ivermectin thing that just get dismissed out of hand rather than, it would appear, talked about in a useful way. What's your view on that?
I'll be fairly cynical coming from the medical fraternity.
Go on.
Okay, let's deal with vitamin D first. I think anyone who doesn't take extra vitamin D is bonkers.
Okay.
Except for the summer months in Portugal, but certainly in the UK, everyone should be taking vitamin D. If you're not white, you should be taking vitamin D all the time. If you're living in Portugal, apart from sort of May to September, you should be taking vitamin D. And vitamin D clearly boosts the immune system. We've known that for years. Vitamin C as well, but vitamin D more so. In terms of supplementation, in terms of the ivermectin, we need more research. There's not enough research to go for or against it at the moment. The problem is that established drugs will not produce as much profit for big pharma as new researched vaccines and treatments. And so while I'm certainly not in any way a fan of Trump when he was suggesting, oh, we should take chloroquine. Well, maybe, but actually, you'll never get the research done because it's such a cheap drug. It's pennies per 100. Pharmaceutical companies have no interest in finding that it'll do anything better than something that they can charge hundreds of pounds for.
Okay, so when you said cynical, I thought you were going to. I thought you were going to say, you were going to be quite traditional in your view from your training, but you're cynical as in how you see this as a commercially, for example.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Eric Willingham, a chicken doctor will say vaccinated chickens for corona can still get sick, but majority have less sickness. But vaccine for corona is not eliminatory as other diseases. Yeah, and I think people do probably are wanting a bit too much from this vaccine, aren't they?
I think we're going to end up with regular anti-corona vaccination like we have regular anti-flu vaccination. And it'll be an annual or maybe biannual. It just depends on how long we manage to see efficacy last for. But we'll have annual or biannual estimations of what varieties of coronavirus we need to protect against for that year.
And when you say anti, as in preparation, in anticipation of, rather than being against.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because the word anti is quite emotional at the moment, isn't it? Yeah, and actually, if I may, I did see a comment, and this is we're in an ocean of information that is so sort of difficult to manage. But I saw somebody say yesterday, it's not strictly speaking a vaccine; it's a gene therapy. Is that a way off thing to say, or is that accurate?
So the mRNA vaccine, quote unquote, the reason that has become an issue is that the FDA have a very specific description of what a vaccine is.
Okay.
The only reason that people don't like it is because what it effectively does is introduce the mRNA, which is part of the DNA family, into the human body and gets the human body to then produce the virus vaccine, a virus protein, rather than introducing the virus protein directly. It's really a semantic point, and I don't see personally any huge difference in terms of the way this works.
Understood. But we do have to choose our words carefully, don't we? Because words have such incredible power, and they get co-opted, and so on. I thought that was an interesting point. So it's by some really strict definition, it isn't a vaccine, but then it's probably a bit too dramatic. If you use the phrase gene therapy, then you are going into another territory altogether, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. For sure. We're talking. This is a very mixed conversation, and we will conclude soon, folks. For sure, Rita does make an amazing feijoada. We just call it bean croque à la Portugal. There you go. There's the hybrid. This is the beauty of. This is the best side of globalization, isn't it? When Jersey people and Portuguese people get together to make the best bean stew ever. Debbie's here, the founder of Share and Care, of course, who we spoke to, doing an amazing job with that group and quite rightly getting some publicity for it. Increase my vitamin C and D. Gosh, my nails are growing. Vitamin D increases your immune system. Wow, we're looking like Imelda Marcos in no time. Neil's not happy. A crapo is a frog. It's getting a bit Channel Islands politics over there. Vitamin D over the winter period is worthwhile anyway. Yep, a lot of vitamin D advocates here. YouTube algorithms work on user engagement, so thumbs up, even thumbs down, and all comments along with your written response to comments will all help. Thanks, Mark. I think we need to have a Zoom call and a beer together about that. Best also get your vitamin D levels tested, says Penny. Is that a simple test, Andy?
It's a blood test, and you can't always get it on demand. I don't know about in Portugal. In the UK, if you were anything other than white, you could get the test on demand.
Okay, and is D presumably isn't like C? I think I've heard vitamin C. Your body eliminates an excess. You can get into some danger if you take too much D, can't you?
Yeah, but you'd have to be taking a huge amount. So, for example, we used to correct vitamin D deficiency with a dose of 300,000 units.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind that the general, this isn't high enough, but the generally accepted regular dosing in the UK is 400 units, and we were giving 300,000. So you're going to have to. You can get large dose tablets, so you don't want to be taking those on a regular basis. But if you take 1,000 units a day, you are not going to get vitamin D poisoning.
Great, that's good to know. Vitamin D tests, the blood ones, do not necessarily reveal the level within the cells. We've got some real experts here, haven't we? Presumably speaking from personal experience, I take vitamin D daily in combination with vitamin K2. I thought that was a mountain. Didn't realize it was a vitamin. I keep a healthy lifestyle apart from smoking. Yeah, that is quite a contrast there in the same sentence. Lol, I eat well, do my vitamins and drink fresh juice every day. I recovered quickly and feel good. Oh, yes, of course, because he had a positive COVID diagnosis in the house for 10 days, I think, and discharged yesterday. I'm sure you're very pleased about that, Lee. Glad to be back out in the outdoors. Thank you for your honesty and nice to have your views, Andy. Yeah, I second that. Cheers, Andy. Really appreciate you being here this morning, talking about the medicine as well as your journey. The science seems to be indicating the annual coronavirus will be a necessity, says Hank. Last few comments next. We've got to let Andy go and have a day in, not a day in Lydia, but a day at home.
Stay on the balcony.
Okay, medical question for Andy. I had my first jab last week. Should I delay move for my second or hope to get it in Portugal?
This is important. Your second jab must be of the same type as the first.
Okay.
And therefore, unless you are sure that whatever you get in the UK is what is being generally given in the area in Portugal to which you are coming, then you should delay your move.
Okay, that's the straightforward advice to you there, Pete. Okay, we've done that one. Vitamin D3 is preferable. Agree, Andy?
Yeah.
Okay, you can get the test done privately through an NHS lab in Birmingham. The world revolves around Birmingham, doesn't it? 29 quid or thereabout twice a year, and you can keep an eye on your vitamin levels. Where I live between October and February, I get no vitamin D from sunlight. Thanks, Penny, for that. You need to take K2 to ensure it gets where it needs to be. Very good. So Mark and Penny are doing that. Clinica Factos y Dilemas. Good morning, gentlemen. Now,
this is Ciccia, who helped me get all my utilities connected up when I came to Portugal, and I introduced her to you 3 or 4 weeks ago. So hi, Ciccia. Ciccia does a great service. I mean, she's not the only person doing it, but she's really good. She's a lawyer. She's trained and worked in the UK. She's now back in Lisbon. She did an immense job negotiating on my behalf with Vodafone, with Gold Energy, with the local water company in Leiria, talking to the landlord when it was all getting a bit difficult. And she said to me, anything, if you get into any trouble, phone me. I'll be there. So a great concierge service, they call it.
That sounds. We need to have that, Cecilia, and I should say bon dia, alegria, Cecilia, to you. Please put your details in our expatsportugal.com forum. Go make friends there, and I'm sure other people will want to take advantage of your well-spoken of services there. That sounds great. I thought it was another sort of erectile dysfunction thing chasing me.
You see?
You know what I mean? Because there are those rumours are scurrilous and unfounded, I can assure you. But it's my age, it's the targeted advertising. I thought someone else had tracked me down trying to sell me such a solution this morning. But good to hear it's not. Right, and thanks, Andy, from Mark. I third that about your great help and thanking you for your honesty, openness, and contribution this morning to us, to our community, Andy. Really appreciate it. And finally, then, would love to have a regular slot with Andy. Thanks, Doc. That kind of puts him on the spot, but do you think I should ask him, everybody, if he will come back and do a regular slot?
Listen, Carl. I love doing this. I hesitate to say it, but I'm a publicity whore. So
That's why we're still here at 10:10, Andy, having started at 9. So yes, I think that's a yes, folks. Brilliant. Thanks, Lol says it obviously isn't one of the services being offered there alongside all those other ones you mentioned, Andy. Thanks for another great GMP. Nice to see you, Andy. Don't forget, Hank, raise that fist, fella. Can we use foreign remote jobs as a means here in Portugal as part of our residency application? That's the D2, isn't it? If yes, how social security and taxes will work? I'm a web developer and work remotely. Nazir, join us for our webinar tomorrow night. We're talking to the wonderful Gilda Pereira from EI Migration Services. We can answer that. So go to expatsportugal.com, go to the upcoming webinars, get yourself on there and join us and ask those questions of an expert, Gilda and team. Ginny Austin, thank you. Most interesting. Yeah, Andy, you've been amazing this morning. So we look forward to creating a regular slot where your need for publicity can be satisfied. Okay. All right. Take care, mate. And thank you, everybody who's been here this morning. Ciao, ciao. Bye for now. And we will see you tomorrow morning. Bye for now.